Today I would like for us to talk about the law before Mount Sinai. Hopefully you all have the handout. I took a tip from Mr. Dave Haver, who said he likes to do handouts for his Bible study, so I made one. And hopefully all of y'all have that at this point. But an interesting aside, the law before Sinai, actually this whole study came from my dad, God rest his soul. He left me a binder, and on it says Blake. And I found it after he passed away. And inside of this binder, I found this study, or at least some of the scriptural references. And I thought, well, how cool, how fascinating, you know? And so I went through it, and I started to look at all these proof texts, and it was very interesting. And he wrote this first portion up here. This is from my dad, this opening paragraph here. The following is a list of 26 laws seen in force in Genesis given by God and subsequently confirmed in the Mosaic Code at Mount Sinai. The law of God existed before a word of it was ever written down or before it was ever revealed to man. While the law of God was included in the Old Testament, its validity does not depend in any way on the Old Covenant. I thought, what does he mean by that? Well, there's this idea in Christianity that when Christ came along with this new and better covenant, that all the old covenant was done away with, but all the laws that were tied to that old covenant, a lot of people thought were done away with, right? They believed that the old covenant laws that were attached to that old covenant were done away with because of Christ's new covenant. And that's just not accurate. Those, as we know, those laws are still in effect. They're still here. Some of those old covenant laws are maybe, let's say, they're not in play because there's no temple, right? The laws that are pertaining to the temple aren't necessarily in effect because there's no temple, but they're still there. Once the temple's rebuilt, they'll come back. But continuing here, I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham, your father. I will give to your descendants all these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws. This is Genesis 26, 3, 5, and I believe this is God talking to Isaac, not Abraham. Isaac. And so this is, I would say, almost a millennia before Sinai. This is a long time before Moses came down with the Decalogue, right? This is a long time before that. So there must have been some commandments. We were talking about in the interactive Bible study this morning even about the sacrifices of Cain and Abel. And I think someone brought up, well, how do we know which one was righteous and which one was unrighteous? How would Cain have known that his sacrifice was not a good sacrifice? Well, I said, I think that there was a law present before Sinai. They knew. And we'll get into that actually here in a little bit. But, it was codified at Mount Sinai is a good way of looking at it. And why would it be important for you to understand that there was a law present before Mount Sinai? Well, I think it's important because you start to relate to the law a little differently. And I believe that the law was, is, and will forever be. I think the law of God goes on in perpetuity. And now what Christ fulfilled was the obligation to the law for the transgression of that law. But he did not dispense with it. And so when we understand that the law was there before Sinai, it gives this characterization of the law that it's indispensable. And I mean that literally. It is not able to be done away with. God does not make mistakes, and he created these laws, and they are in effect to this very day. So without further ado, let's go ahead and look at the first law that we can cover here, the law of the Sabbath before Sinai. Law of Sabbath before Sinai is going to be Genesis 2, verses 2 through 3. And I know y'all believe this one because y'all are in front of me. So here we are. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. And that's, it's a good thing. God is incorporating here, I think, an idea that there is a rhythm to life. There's ebb and flow. There's a time to work. There's a time to sit back and enjoy the fruits of your labor, as it were. And so, there it is. This is long time before it was described at Mount Sinai, the law of the Sabbath. And again, just to keep building a case for why it's important to understand this, to build some deep roots inside of this, will again be able to help to explain to your brothers and sisters why you feel like these things are still in effect. They're still here. The next one we can see is the law of sacrifices. I don't think we're going to get through all of these, by the way. I'm going to get through as many of these as possible. So I do have my timer going, just so you know. So if we're able to get through all of them, great. If not, maybe y'all can invite me back if I do a good job. So the law of the sacrifices starts in Genesis chapter 3, verses 21. Chapter 3, verses 21. See here. Also for Adam and his wife, the Lord God made tunics of skin and clothed them. Well, you might say, well, Blake, how does that prove that there's a law of sacrifices? Well, where did they get the skin? Where did God get the skin? I think that he got it from the animal sacrifices. It's a bit of reading between the lines here, so maybe, you might have a difference of opinion on that, but I think that that implies that there were some sacrifices that were going on. And by the way, an aside, if any of you find that what I say here today is wrong, come and tell me. I'm one of those that invites criticism. I know where I stand with my Creator. I won't be offended at all. So please come bring to me what you think is wrong or incorrect. Next one we can see here is chapter 4, verse 4. Chapter 4, verse 4. And this is the one we were talking about at the interactive Bible study. Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and their fat. And the Lord respected Abel and his offering. But he did not respect Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell, and we know the story thereafter, that he was so upset that he took his brother's life. But there is an indication that there was some sacrifices, some offerings being made. So there is the law of the sacrifice. Chapter 15, verse 9. Chapter 15, verse 9. Another example of sacrifices. So he said to him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, a 3-year-old ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Then he brought all these to him, and he cut them in two, down the middle, and placed each opposite of each other. But he did not cut the birds in two. And this is the sacrifice that, Abraham makes. And he, that he falls into a deep sleep thereafter. And so, again, another example that the law of sacrifice was present before Sinai. We could even get into chapter 22, verse 2. Chapter 22, verse 2. And this is, this is a heavy one. And this is the sacrifice that God commanded of Abraham, of his son. Then he said to him, take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. Oof, that is a heavy one. And I think that's the importance of sacrifice. For me, these laws all have underpinnings of being just good, valuable principles. The idea of sacrifice is huge. The idea of foregoing pleasure, forestalling something now for the future is a huge concept. It's a big concept. It's a concept that allows civilizations to either thrive or to dwindle and to basically go off into the sunset. All of these laws for me have this great spiritual lesson to them as well. And God likes things to work on multiple levels. And for me, the idea of sacrifice is a huge concept. No matter what time, no matter what era, no matter what age you live in, what place you live in, the idea of sacrifice is an important one. The next one we can look at is the law of acceptance of sacrifice by fire. We'll call this a burnt offering. We just talked about it. It was in verses 2. It says, then he said, and he says there, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering. So there's this idea that we have to make the sacrifice by burning it. Another version of that we can find is in chapter 8, verses 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and offered, there it is, burnt offering on the altar. So, there's some indication that there was a protocol that it needed to have the sacrifice be completed by burning it. Next, let's get into the law of clean and unclean. And we just saw that as well in the previous verse here, talking about he built an altar and he took every clean and, how did he know what was clean? He had to have known because the law was already there. But let's look at chapter 8, verses 20. And then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird, and offered the burnt offering on the altar. There it is. So he had to have known what was clean to be able to bring that as an offering. We now have it in chapter 12, verses 7. Chapter 12, verses 7. Then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, to your descendants I will give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent. Hold on, I think I'm wrong. Am I on the right here? I'm sorry, y'all. I moved on to the next one, which was the law of the altar. I apologize. I was like, that doesn't seem right. So now we'll move on to the law of the altar, which that makes a little bit more sense now. Let's go ahead and complete that one. That's chapter 12, verses 7 through 8. And this is just simply demonstrating that there was a law of having an altar. That the altar was this idea that there was a specific place, a specific location that you would present these offerings to God. And so you see that with Abram here. And then you can go back to chapter 8, verses 20. Chapter 8, verses 20, which we just covered, which again has the case where Noah had built an altar to the Lord. And he took every clean animal. So again, another altar being built there. And then we can go to chapter 13. Happy these are all very close together. I have you all flipping back and forth here. Chapter 13, verses 18. Then Abram moved his tent and went and dwelt by the terebinth trees at Merimah, which were at Hebron, and he built an altar there to the Lord. Again, another altar being built. You can look at the others. For brevity's sake, let's move on to the next one. You get the idea. There was this idea of an altar, a law of the altar in effect before Sinai. The law of eating blood. Let's go back to chapter 9, verse 4. Chapter 9, verse 4. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And so, God doesn't want us to eat things that are, alive or still have their life blood in them. So there's the law of eating blood. The one that's very close to that, the next one is the law of eating flesh, which we can see in Genesis 9:3. Right before that, every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. So, there's the law of eating flesh being, presented. Next one we can find is the law against murder. Genesis 9:5. It's there right after, so these are all bunched up together. It's great. Surely for your lifeblood I will demand a reckoning. For the hand of every beast I will require it. And from the hand of man, from the hand of every man's brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. There it is. That's the law against murder. I thought that the account with Cain and Abel might be a better example, but it's a bit. You have to read between the lines with that one. You get that God is not happy with Cain, as he says that his brother's blood cries out to him. But this one's more pointedly, very direct, that murder is prohibited. The next we have is the law of parental authority. Listen up, young ones. Listen up. The law of parental authority. You go to chapter 18, verse 9. Chapter 18, verse 9. 19, chapter 19. Or chapter 18, verse 19. For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham that which he has spoken to him. And this is a good one. I thought about this. It was written down and codified, the law, at Sinai, but it existed, I think, in an oral traditional form before Sinai. I think there was this idea that you had the law being presented to people, and this idea of maybe around a campfire sharing with each other about the law and sharing about what God had said to do and what God had revealed to them. The law existed in the form of maybe watching your dad do some things, what he didn't do, when he did these things, when he didn't do these things. I know that's how I learned a lot of the things from the Bible, that before I even knew how to read, before I even knew how to open this Bible, I watched my dad and I watched what he would do and when he would do these things. And so, I think that the law had existed in the form of oral doctrine in a lot of ways, which, Christ comes to do away with the tradition of the elders, but I think that the law of God existed in a lot of ways in the form of kind of living the law and us seeing it. So, good for the little ones to look up to your father, right? To learn what to do and what not to do. And that's a good thing no matter what society we're talking about. Another one is chapter 22. This is where Abraham is taking Isaac to sacrifice him. And you talk about listening to your dad. Here we have Isaac carrying the wood for his sacrifice, right? And I'm pretty sure he was aware that he was the sacrifice, as he has a very strange question of, well, where is the offering? Well, you're the offering, but he says God will provide to his son. And so absolutely an example of parental authority being exhibited there by Isaac. Let's look at the next one, the law of monogamy. Let's see here, make sure I'm not going over on time. I'm good here. Okay, good. Law of monogamy here. We have chapter 12, verses 17. Make sure I have that right. Chapter 12, verse 17. But the Lord plagued Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is this thing you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say, 'She is my sister'? I might have taken her as my wife. Now therefore, here is your wife. Take her and go away." Even this pagan man, Pharaoh, knew that this was not right. This was not good. It was a prohibition against adultery there. He had, whatever you want to believe about why Abraham or Abram at that time lied to Pharaoh, it was not a good thing. Even he knew that. And very, very closely akin to that is the law against adultery, which is the next one. And we can find that, that's the same reference there. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. We can find another text. Let's see here. Chapter 20, verses 3. Chapter 20, verses 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, Indeed, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her. And he said to the Lord, Lord, will you will you also slay a righteous nation? Did he not say to me, she is my sister? And even she said herself, he is my brother. And in the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have not done this. And God said to him in a dream, Yes, I know that you did this in the integrity of your heart, for I also withheld you from sinning against me. There, sinning against me, right? There it is. He calls it sin. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now, therefore, restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet, and he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not restore her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. So, he even calls adultery a sin right there. Sin is a transgression of the law. Looking here, we can see in chapter 26, verses 10. Chapter 26, verses 10. It's interesting. We have Isaac now talking to Abimelech, which he pulled the same thing here. And Abimelech said, What is this you have done to us? One of the people might soon have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt on us. So Abimelech charged all his people, saying, He who touches this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. Again, another example of the prohibition against adultery. And lastly, you can look that one up for brevity's sake. It's again another example of adultery not being acceptable. Next, let's look at the law as it pertains to the priesthood. We can see in chapter 14, verses 18. Chapter 14, verses 18. Then Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was the priest of God Most High. So there we have it. There's an indication. I know there's a lot of different schools of thought about the nature of Melchizedek and who he is and what he meant, but you do see there that it says he was a priest of God the Most High. There was a priestly order that was present even before the Levites. We have the law of tithing, which is on the tail end of chapter 14 here, which we see here after. We can see here in 20. Let's just pick it up at 19. Chapter 14, verses 19. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. And he gave him a tithe of all. Well, there it is. Tithing was around even before the giving of Sinai. This is, was around. This was around. There's another example of tithing in chapter 28, verses 22. You can go to turn over there, chapter 28, verses 22. And this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house. This is Jacob. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. And this is where we come up with the 10th idea, I think. And so people, I think, relate to tithing a little differently. This characterizes tithing a little differently here. It's like, look, everything that you give me, God, I will set aside a portion and give it back to you, or the priestly order, and to assist the church, as it were. But a lot of people today feel like that they've generated their income. I went out there, I worked for all this, and I will give God some of the thing that I've created. It's like, no, that's not how this is at all. God gave that to you. It's you simply handing some of that back to show your adoration. The law of covenants, not to be confused with law and covenant. Genesis, we can go to chapter 15, verses 10. Chapter 15, verses 10. Then he brought all these to him and cut them into two, down the middle, and placed each piece opposite the other. but he did not cut the birds in two. And when the vultures came down onto the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Now when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram. And behold, horror and great darkness fell upon him. Then he said to Abram, know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge. Afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. Now as for you, you shall go to your father in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. But in the fourth generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. It's an interesting piece there. We could probably do a whole Bible study about what that means. The sin of the Amorites not being yet full. But anyways, continuing, 17. And it came to pass, when the sun set down, and it was dark, that behold, there appeared a smoking oven and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. On the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying that your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates. So we have an example there that there is a law of covenant. There is some idea that there is a covenant and there is a way that it goes. It gets sanctified or it gets codified maybe inside of the sacrificial system. That we sacrifice this thing and it now makes this covenant binding. See in chapter 17, verses 1 through 4. I have another example of covenant. Chapter 17, verses 1 through 4. When Abram was 99 years old, and the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. Again, another example of covenant being described and looked at. See another one in 21 verses 27, chapter 21 verses 27. So Abraham at this point took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. And Abraham set the 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. Then Abimelech asked Abraham, what is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs which you have set them by themselves? He said, you will take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand, that they may be my witness, and that I have dug this well. Therefore he called that place Beersheba, because the two of them swore an oath. There they made a covenant at Beersheba. So a covenant can be between two men. It can be between God and man. It can be between, different parties. It doesn't just pertain to the covenant of between God and man. And you can, again, look up you can look up, there isn't another one there. But there's a lot of examples of covenant through Genesis. It's all through there. This is an interesting one, the law of intercession. We talked about this again at the interactive Bible study this morning. This is chapter 18, verses 23. Chapter 18, verses 23. This is where you have, I think it's Abraham at this point, trying to convince God to be merciful to Sodom, for Lot's sake, I think, is mostly what's going on here. But anyways, let's start at verses 23. And Abraham came near and said, would you also destroy the righteousness with the wicked? Suppose that there were 50 righteous men within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare it for the 50 righteous that were in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you, shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Those are some strong words to say to God. But he says, so the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. And then Abraham says, well, so he's interceding on their behalf. He says, well, then Abraham answered and said, indeed now, I who am but dust and ashes, he's really laying himself low. He says, hey, have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Look, I am nothing and I'm coming to you who you are the Lord. Suppose there were 5 less. than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all of the city for lack of 5? So the Lord said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again and said, suppose there should be 40 found there? So he said, I will not do it for the sake of the 40. And then he said, let not the Lord be angry. I will speak, suppose 30 should be there. So he said, I will not do it for the sake of the 30 there. And he said, indeed, now I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 should be found there. So he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. And he gets them all the way down to 10. And we know that there was not even 10 men found there that were righteous. So God does apparently allow for us to intercede on different people's behalf. But also sometimes his answer is no. You can intercede, you can ask for God for something, for healing, for financial gains, but sometimes his answer is no. And as I think you see Abraham here, it's good for us to preface our requests and our petitions to God with an understanding, look, I don't know. You know, Father, you know everything. You know the end from the very beginning. All I know is at this time in this place, I would like X, Y, or Z. And then you have to hear the no if he says no. My thing is I give it 3 times. I give 3 prayers to God for a certain thing. And if after that 3rd time it doesn't happen, well, then that's God's will for me. But anyways, a law of intercession. Let's see here. There's a couple more examples, I think. Yeah, there was one more example I saw. Chapter 20, verse 17. Chapter 20, verses 17. So Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, his wife, and his female servants, that they bore children. For the Lord had closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. This is whenever he had lied to Abimelech. But, Abraham intercedes on the house of Abimelech's behalf. He asks for God's prayer for their house, and he hears the intercession. And so there's the law of intercession here. We have the law of circumcision, which is found in chapter 17, verses 9. Chapter 17, verses 9. And God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my commandment, you and your descendants after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. And Abraham was 99 years old. I mean, this was a pretty intense ordeal. But that was a way to marking your flesh that you were his. And so there we have it, that there was a law of circumcision. There's another example of this, I believe, and with Dinah, and I can't remember the name. I think it was Shechem, who wanted to marry Dinah, who was a part of Jacob's household, and they said, you can't marry her because you're not circumcised, right? This idea that, again, circumcision was important. The law against licentiousness. This is an easy example. This is Sodom and Gomorrah right here. We have chapter 18, verses 20. Chapter 18, verses 20. And the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it, that it has come to me. And if not, I will know. We can jump over to know that it was lasciviousness or licentiousness, that this was sexual indiscretions going on. This was happening there because of chapter 19, verses 5, where it says, this is whenever they're talking to Lot. The men of Sodom have gathered around the house, and they said, where there are men who came to you tonight, bring them out to us so that we may know them carnally. So we know that this was going on, and this is what God was against. This is what they were about in Sodom. And so we have the next one about the law about birthright that was present before Sinai. The law is found in chapter 25, verses 33. Chapter 25, verses 33. And then Jacob said, "Swear to me as this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob, for a bowl of soup. That was a wretched deal, wasn't it? And Jacob gave to Esau bread and stew of lentils. And then he ate and drank and arose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Whether you agree with what Esau did there or not, there is this idea that birthright exists and that it's present, again, before Sinai. And so it's always a bizarre encounter for me, but I think it's something like Esau did not appreciate what had been given to him, right? And so Jacob was happy to lay claim to that thing. But the next we can see here is the law of anointing with oil. This is an interesting practice that we even hold today. That was a little vial of oil that was given to me at my ordination to anoint people that were asking for prayer. But you can find the precedence of this inside of chapter 28, verses 18. Chapter 8, verses 18. Then Jacob rose early in the morning, and he took the stone that he had put at his head, set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on top of it. And he cried the name of that place Bethel. But the name of that city had been Luz previously. And so there's this idea that, there was anointing going on there with oil. So, there's another example in chapter 35, verse 14. Chapter 35, verse 14. Again, Jacob setting up a pillar in the place where he had talked with him, a pillar of stone, and he poured out a drink offering on it, and he poured oil on top of it, which covers the next one, which is, I'm not going to cover, actually we're getting a little short on time here, so, there's a lot of laws here that you can, at your leisure, go through and prove to yourself that they existed before Sinai. But I did want to get to the last one for me because I thought this was an interesting one. The last one, number 26 there, the law to observe appointed times. This is found in Genesis 19, verses 3. And before I cover it, the reason why I find this interesting is that a lot of people have it that these old holy days, these Israelite holy days were for the ancient Hebrews, right? Were for the Israelites. But this is happening. This is this is before they were even considered Israelites, right? This is before Jacob. This is before Jacob had his name changed to Israel, which is where we get the word Israelites from. They were technically Hebrews at this point, I think. But anyways, you can find that there's an indication. You have to read between the lines here a little bit. But for me, there's an indication that for sure the law to observe appointed times is found in chapter 19, verses 3. And this is to set the stage here. We have Lot, who's invited the two angels into his home, and he's insisted that they come and that they enter his house, that they not hang around the front gate, and that they allow for him to fix them a meal. And he says, but he insisted strongly. So they turned in to him and entered his house. Then he made to them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate it. So, there's an indication here that the days of unleavened bread were probably taking place. Right? Unleavened bread is a bit of a peculiar thing to mention there. I know that unleavened bread is not an uncommon thing to eat during those times. It's called flatbread, and for many societies they would eat flatbread, and that's not a big deal. But it is a bit peculiar that they separate it from the feast here. If it's a common thing that would have been a part of any meal, then that's a part of the reference to a feast. But they take a special chance to mention it, and baked unleavened bread. For me, that indicates that it would have been during the time of unleavened bread. And you could also even say that the law to observe the Sabbath is another law to have to point to that there is a law to observe appointed times. Anyways, hopefully this was something that was interesting to you. It's something that you can maybe take out and to prove to people that feel like the law was done away with, and say that, look, this has been around forever. This will always be around, and be able to walk through that with them. And so let's go ahead and close in prayer. Our dear Heavenly Father, again, we come before you, and we thank you so very much, Father, for your word and your laws and your ways. We ask that we're able to diligently hold on to them, Father, and exhibit them and to incorporate them in our lives. We ask now for your dismissal before the sermon, Father, and we ask that you continue to be with us and to bless us. We ask all these things in Jesus Christ's most precious and holy name. Amen.